Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Banky, and I'm the Manager of Communications and Development here at Forward Community Investments. And I would like to welcome you to today's webinar titled Nonprofits and Voting, Debunking the Myths and Misconceptions with Dana Schultz, Executive Director with Wisconsin Voices. Forward Community Investments is a community developmental financial institution that serves the entire state of Wisconsin. We are an investor, connector, and advisor for organizations and initiatives that reduce racial inequities and socioeconomic disparities. We are able to accomplish through community financing, community development services, and grant making. For more information regarding FCI and all that we do, I invite you to visit our website at forwardci.org. At this time, I'd like to share some housekeeping notes with you. This presentation will be recorded and posted on our website for you to share sometime this week. In addition to the recording, we will also be posting the presentation slides as well that you can share. An email will be sent to all registrants next week or this week with all of that information, so you don't have to worry about reaching out to us. We will also be taking questions throughout the presentation, questions and comments and anything that you'd like to share. There's two options that you can do that. On the right-hand side of the GoToWebinar toolbar, there's little arrows that point to questions or chat. So you can put in any questions that you may have. We're going to be taking questions throughout the presentation, also doing some engagement as well throughout the webinar. So if that's the way to interact with us. So thank you. Now, let's go on to our presentation. As I'm sure most of you are aware, there is a very critical election coming up in November. FCI has decided to act and ensure our partner organizations have the tools and knowledge that can be passed along to all voter eligible citizens that will assist them in registering and voting in the upcoming election. It is critical to note that the politicians that we elect during this election process shape the policies that affect everyone. Do not expect someone to speak up for you. You need to speak up for yourself. So thank you all for joining us today. And at this point, I'd like to turn control over to Dana, and she'll be doing our presenting.
Good afternoon. Can you all hear me? Yes. Fantastic. Okay, I'm going to take that as a yes. I am so excited to be here. Thanks, Tom and FCI, for having me. I'm kind of on a voting high. I just early voted today. Milwaukee early vote sites opened today, and we had a press conference with many of our partners, with the mayor and the Legal Women Voters and many other organizations because tomorrow is National Voter Registration Day. So I'm sitting here, you can't see me, but I got my I voted early sticker on, and I'm feeling very civically minded. So I'm really excited to be here with you all. I'm gonna get right into it, and we're gonna open this webinar up for questions and chats along the way to kind of hear from you all. I saw kind of a list of who's on the call, and we have a wide range of nonprofits around the state. So excited to hear about what your questions, what your concerns, what your ideas and examples of getting your staff, your organization, your clients or members a part of democracy and making sure they can participate and have their voice heard. So really quickly, the agenda for today is we're going to go I'll do a brief explanation of who I am, and then we're going to go right into some of the top myths and misconceptions that I hear from other nonprofits about voting. And then next, I have a 101 election activity checklist, some do's and do nots or cans and cannots for 501c3s to remember. And I didn't make this up. I have some great resources that we use at Wisconsin Voices, and we show and promote with all of our partners, and want to share some of those great ones with you. Tom did send out a PDF. That's a great kind of one to two pager on this. Then we'll pause. So keep your questions or put your questions in the questions box on the webinar, and we'll get to them and kind of just clarifying questions or questions you might have or you've heard that you'd like kind of cleared up. I'm not a lawyer, but I work with a lot of them, and we've done a ton of trainings on this particular topic of what we can do as 501c3s. Then we'll go into just a few kind of human reminders about motivating people to vote, motivating people to do anything. And lastly, we're going to spend some time on some really great examples of some of your colleagues around the state and great examples of civic engagement in nonprofits in Wisconsin. And then, of course, we'll end with some reminders and some resources and brainstorm time and questions. Cool. So with that, I'm going to get right into it. Like I said, I'm the executive director of Wisconsin Voices. We are a dynamic network. We have about 62 nonprofits as partners around the state. We work to kind of set shared goals to build a better democracy. So we work to build our partners' capacity. This year, we developed a voter registration voter resources app that our partners can use not only to help register to vote, but then follow up with people to make sure they know about what and where and how and of actually casting their ballot. We also raise money and try to resource it and re-grant it out to some of our partners. We focus on trying to amplify our partners' impact and nurture new leadership. So we often have leadership pipelines in the nonprofit community, specifically around data and organizing and management, for example. And then we focus on promoting racial equality and championing transparent policies. So both the doing of voter engagement, but also the systemic policy work. And then lastly, we work to foster civic engagement so everyone has an equal voice. Here's a beautiful picture of some of our partners. I'm kind of poking my head out in the back there. Bonus points if you know who I am in the back. And then you can get a hold of me on my email, and this is our office line. I encourage you all to follow Wisconsin Voices on Facebook or on Twitter. We share out kind of non-branded great resources or shareables. I'll show you a few of those later on. And all nonpartisan things to do. So some common questions and misconceptions. I think the biggest one we'll get right into, but here's Scully reminding us that it's a myth that nonprofits can't do anything voting related. So sometimes I hear this one. This is the first kind of the big one is just, oh, no, that's not us. Can't do that. And that might stem from a variety of reasons, whether it be, might never thought of it. It's just not in our current work plan, so it's out of sight, out of mind. Or you may really think you can't, and you're just scared or nervous of the uncertainty of what it means to be involved in an election and what your goals could be. So just to be really clear, federal tax law explicitly prohibits 501c3s from supporting or opposing candidates, but it actually says right in the tax law that it recognizes the importance of 501c3s participation in the democracy process. So there's a lot of things that we can do. Yes, you can. And it's really, I believe it's our role to educate and encourage participation. So the second myth and misconception is, well, okay, we could do it, but we're just not sure how XYZ stakeholder, whether it be a staff person or a board member or a funder, what they would think or how this would play. I hear this a lot of just, yeah, I personally am down and I promote voting all the time, and so does our staff, but as an organization, So my advice is, you don't want your board or your funders or whoever to give you the thumbs down and just like outright tell you, But you also don't need them to be pit bull and like waving from across the field and just saying, you got to do this, you can do this. And just, I guess I want to give you the encouragement to say, voter education is legal. It's encouraged by in your 501c3 status, and that engaging the community or your clients, I hope it's not a big stretch for you to see how that does enhance your mission. And that's not mission drift, but exactly further accentuates it. And And then what I also think is important is like the how. So um, we want to give you a few very specific examples and simple ways to operationalize or make this happen in your organization so that it's not just an idea that comes and goes every election cycle, but you really could see how it fits into your intake process or an event that you're already pulling together. And oh, just to back up on this, I also want to say we are working with some folks. If you actually are about to go into a board meeting and want to present this or think about how to incorporate this into funding proposals, I'd be happy to follow up with you one-on-one on the kind of conversations, the kind of triggers to stay away from, but also the kind of the information that some board members might not know, including the resource, this PDF that I shared with you. And then lastly, here's another one is, this maybe is more about once you get into doing voter education work, some people feel really stumped when they hear from a client or a community member, or frankly, their own family members, that my vote doesn't count, or I don't feel like it matters. And I think this is the biggest thing that we run into in the field, whether it's knocking on doors with our partners or trying to register college students. We're getting a sense, there's some people who just don't vote because they don't know about it or haven't been asked, but also need really a motivation. So I have a few, there's a lot of different answers to this question. I don't have a one size fits all, but I'll just say that bottom line, listen and understand where people are coming from in terms of their voice not being heard in this democracy. And to be real, like voting wasn't designed for everyone, from the start. And that's been a major flaw and problem with our country and our history. And we've had a very spotted past of making sure the franchise is really open to not just men and not just white people and not just landowners, but that both citizenship status and the franchise and the voting and our constitutional right is not just given, but also really the process is allowed for everyone. And we still have to fight that at every corner. People's constitutional right is taken away if they get convicted of a felony, and that doesn't have to be that way. Other states don't take away that constitutional right, for example. So here's some of the things, just really quick, we've done this year. We did a great photo shoot and then have ads, and we just asked people, why do you vote? And they said, I vote because, and they have different reasons that really motivates them. And so I guess this just makes me excited because people have different reasons, and it tends to be very personal or connected to who they are and where they're from and who they see. So this was a really fun campaign, and some of these billboards are up on Milwaukee buses now. But check out that resource, vote411.org. It's just some general nonpartisan information that you can share. So, all right, quick questions. I want to just hear from you all if you could engage in the chat. Yeah, ask any questions here, but I'd also love to hear, as your organization, where are you at in terms of engaging in election activity? Is that part of your mission? Is it part of course it's part of your mission, but like, do you have a plan this year? Are you thinking about it? Are you still like, geez, I don't know who would do that? Kind of just give me an update on where your organization is at and what kind of activities either you're doing or maybe you're not doing yet.
Great, and I'll just chime in here too, just as Dana, was asking folks to kind of put that in the chat feature, or if they want to use the questions feature as well. I had just initiated a couple questions. What types of voting activities are you doing? Do you all have a plan so far? So feel free to go ahead and share that with the group using the chat feature or the questions feature.
Great. So we'll wait for those to come, or as those come in, I'm going to go right into some cans and cannots, some do's and do nots, a checklist on election activity. And I'm directly using this great resource. We work with an organization called Alliance for Justice, and they have a specific, I guess, program within them that's called Boulder Advocacy. And that's not Boulder, Colorado. It's Boulder, like stronger, more robust and clear. And this has just been fantastic for us. We work with a broad range of 501c3s. And when it comes time for election year, there's a lot of questions about, it's, people ask me who to vote for, and we know we can't do that. And just, how far can we go to really educate? What does that mean? And how do we keep that line really clear that we're not crossing it around anything outside the limits of a 501c3? So I'm just going to go into a few of the suggestions. And again, I'm really referencing the PDF that Tom sent out.
Dana, we actually received a few comments regarding, would you like me to share those with you now, kind of things that are happening? Would that be okay?
That'd be great.
Okay, yeah. So one individual just said that we're just getting started to engage voters and began that by tapping a staff member to develop civic engagement programming for their organization. They're also running a staff voter education day with the local League of Women Voters to gauge internal commitment to the democratic process. So that's wonderful. That's taking place from one of the organizations that we have. So just wanted to chime in with that.
Thanks. Keep those coming. Cool. All right. So here's some of the things 501c3s, and if y'all don't know that, this is the tax status, meaning the federal tax law is 501c3s, nonprofit or charitable organizations. Here's the big one is you can do basically anything as long as it doesn't endorse a candidate. And I'll get into a lot of specifics around specific activities. That's the big one, is staying away from going in and supporting or opposing one particular candidate for office. That's kind of the biggest rule that you just want to remember. So this does apply to all 501c3s. If you're a private foundation, there are a few specific things that you gotta watch out for, especially. So I'm not addressing private foundations, but this is for charitable organizations or nonprofits. So number one thing is you can conduct voter registration drives. So go out and not just encourage people to register, but actually help people complete their voter registration. And in Wisconsin, we have an online system called My Vote. It's on the state's website, myvote.wi.gov. There's a few people in our eligible voters that aren't able to complete their online registration through that, but by and large, most people are able to do that. And we really encourage y'all, you can just check your voter registration status on myvote.wi.gov. So that's a big yes. Second one is to get out the vote, nonpartisan get out the vote education. So we call some of these activities tactics. They are ways to achieve this larger goal. So phone calls, maybe it's a phone call or a robocall or live phone calls to your list or people that have come through your doors this year. Door knocking, so maybe it's picking some wards around your office or a particular neighborhood that you want to engage anyway for your organization. It's engaging in digital media. I have a bunch of shareables and things that you can use or create your own on your social media. And then newsletters or other ways that you communicate with your folks. So just encouraging them to vote and encouraging them to have a specific plan to vote. And we'll talk more about that later. So thirdly, you can conduct nonpartisan public education or training on participation of the political process. So we sometimes do workshops on just like understanding your ballot, not to tell them how to vote, but that, if you've never seen a ballot before, that might be really complicated. And don't underestimate, what it means to be a new voter and seeing this kind of complicated document for the first time. You can educate candidates on public interest issue within the purview of your organization. So say you work on literacy and you know that literacy is going to be an important issue on the state budget, for example. So you can talk to not just current elected officials, but candidates for office on this issue, because it's very much in the purview of your organization. So you can actually engage directly with candidates. My advice is to reach out to all the candidates, and maybe all of them won't respond to you, but at least have that email or have that phone call go to all of the candidates that are running in that particular race. And then you can canvass the public on issues and voting information. So like I said, that could be phone calls or door canvassing, and you can go out anywhere you want to go and educate on that process. Here's a few more. You can publish legislative scorecards. So some people are like, yeah, we go and ask people to register to vote, and then they ask me, okay, who do I vote for? And you're like, well, I know I can't tell them exactly, but you can say, well, based on their legislative record, and here this is, you vote your values if you care about X. And you've got to let the person fill in the dots, but those are just the facts. How someone voted on particular issues takes a little research, but you can put that together for your people. And then prepare candidate questionnaires and voter guides. So I didn't fill this in, but a great example of this is the League of Women Voters has a statewide candidate questionnaire and voter guide, and I'll make sure to send that out as well. And they do a great job of ensuring all of those questions fit the 501c3 nonpartisan standards. So it's a great resource to share, and they have it statewide. And then you can sponsor candidate debates. This really gets in the heart of things. But if you want two candidates or three, whoever, to really dig in on with the people in your community or your clients, there's nothing like inviting them to your office. And then you can engage in lobbying. So a lot of people don't think you can do this, but 501c3s have a lobbying limit. All you have to do is track it. You have to track those hours, whether it be direct or indirect lobbying. I could do a whole webinar on lobbying. This is a big misconception that 501c3s can't. And we do, and we just need to make sure that we track those hours and report them, and that we stay under a certain limit, which is very generous, actually, in the state of Wisconsin. So if you really want to move things, I know sometimes lobbyist is a dirty word, but I think we need more folks in the nonprofit community going and just saying very clearly, we want this bill or this policy being supported. Our clients, our members need it. So that's a list of the cans. There's a lot more other specifics. I tried to just pull out some big ones. And here's some of the cannots, the don'ts. So a finger wave. And I already mentioned a few. One is you can't endorse candidates. So no opposing, no supporting any particular candidates. And this does get tricky. Like I said, if you're out there, we get asked a lot, who to vote for? What do you think about this candidate? And for us, we have some simple talking points for our partners and our staff of just how to answer that question and stay C3. And a lot of times it's pivoting them to saying, hey, we encourage you to vote your values, and we want you to explore that. If you want more information, here's a great resource. And we usually share them if there's a local resource, but the state League of Women Voters voter guide is a great one. And the other things 501c3s can't do is make campaign contributions, either directly to a campaign or in-kind service. So you can't volunteer your staff's time to make phone calls, right? That would be an in-kind service. And you can't publish anything explicitly or implicitly that opposes the candidate. This kind of just gets to not endorsing candidates. And then you can't ask candidates to sign a very specific pledge on a dividing issue. So this one's hard because it might be just a way of trying to get a commitment while they're a candidate. I know a lot of our organizations are are thinking about doing something like this, so that going into next year, we want to make sure we know exactly where they are and we can hold them accountable. There are ways to get around this that has been creative, that isn't, dividing issue. So those are some of the cannots. And I want to actually just pause here for questions. I don't know if there's any clarifying questions that anyone has on the cans or cannots.
Sure. Thanks, Dana. So we did receive a few comments, excuse me, regarding what types of activities were taking place that are currently being done by some of these organizations, and then we do have some questions as well. So one individual had asked that they're looking for ways to encourage voter registration. So if you could share any tips with that, that would be great.
Okay, sure. And we're going to get into a few examples of other groups, but to encourage voter registration, well, one is I would think about, how do you communicate with your folks? So whether that be a member email list, that's an obvious start, is I could help you craft an email list, and we send out text messages that are super short, punchy, that usually have one specific ask. So tomorrow is National Voter Registration Day. So that's our ask. It's check your voter registration status and give them the link to do that. We also have groups that then have, if you have a place that people come into, if you have clients that physically come into your space, we recommend setting up like a voter registration kiosk. And that's as simple as having a laptop or a tablet with data on it that has the myvote.wi.gov website, and then just some simple directions. Maybe you have someone monitor that, like, if you have someone that's like at the door, so that if someone's kind of hovering around, you give them an extra nudge to encourage it. So that's staff time light, but there's at least one trained staff person that encourages that. We also have some organizations that we encourage staff time to volunteer and work with an organization that's proactively going out in the community, like the League of Women Voters, we have about 22 organizations that are in Milwaukee and Madison and Racine, Kenosha, Green Bay, and Wausau, all around the state, that are going to different places to reach new people or young folks or unlikely voters. And in Milwaukee, for example, in Madison, I know there's kiosks for voter registration at libraries. So just getting out kind of a local information on the state's website, or a place to go for an encouraging person to walk you through that process. Those are some of the.
Dana, I just wanted to mention one quick thing too. So the League of Women Voters have chapters all across the state too, and they're incredibly active. I have just been working with them and finding events. Obviously, you had mentioned that it's National Voter Registration Day tomorrow, and there's a ton of events that are going on here in Madison. But also, you can also check in with your local chapter of the Wisconsin League of Women Voters.
Yeah, they're fantastic. And lastly, we've developed an app. So if you really want to take this seriously, we'd love to work with you this year or possibly in the future. What the app does, it sits on top of the state's website, but it basically asks ahead of going to register a pledge to vote. And we found that as a highly effective tactic of just peer-to-peer, look someone in the eye and ask them, will you pledge to vote November 6th or whatever the next election is? And then it collects their basic information, and then it takes them over to the state website. And what we're able to do with that is, A, to know if they were able to complete their registration, and if they weren't, why? Can we help them out? And B, we found that in 2016, more people were registered to vote and didn't actually cross the finish line and vote, more than any other year. So we found that our registration efforts were important and huge, and it's the first kind of ticket to voting, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for a lot of new people, or people who felt some sort of way about, if their voice was being heard, or maybe the candidates weren't speaking to them, and they needed an extra level of encouragement or push, or maybe they had questions about their photo ID. So we found by following up with people we registered and said that didn't vote, we said, hey, what happened? From a place of love, but what happened? And so we had a lot of different, things come up, but we said, wow, we need to do more to not just register folks, but give them that extra attention of where to go and how to do it and motivating factors.
Dana, that leads into a pretty good segue into a question that we had just received. So that voter pledge that you were speaking of, that would be considered non-divisive, correct?
Yeah, so this is just a pledge to vote.
Sure.
So that non-divisive sign a pledge. So this is asking voters that cannot or do not point that I make that's still up here. That's directly to candidates. So that's we'd say to Leah Vukmir and Tammy Baldwin, will you pledge to sign a something around XY, transportation in the state in the federal budget? Like that's what we can do. What I'm talking about is you ask everyone who comes in your office, hey, we have an important election coming up. We'd love your voice to be heard. Will you pledge to vote? Just pledge to vote. And they're not saying who to vote for, but just making that ask, that personal ask to saying, will you mark your calendar and make sure you're personally pledging to be a voter? And so that's what I'm talking about. It's a super effective way of nonpartisan way of getting that extra commitment and building kind of a list of people who they said they would vote.
So then it's okay to have them sign a pledge on a non-divisive issue. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, when you're talking to voters, and we're not talking about candidates, so I just want to be really clear. Talking to voters, you could actually get them to sign a pledge on a divisive issue. Will you pledge to vote on universal background checks? I don't know. Everything's divisive these days. So, but we have a lot of our nonpartisan partners, whatever issues they're working on would be, will you pledge to vote to support equal pay? One of our partners, Kids Forward, has a race to the polls. Will you pledge to vote and support candidates who are talking explicitly about racial equity? And so, you can define divisive how you want, but the divisive, don't sign a pledge on divisive issues, that's only for candidates. So I just want to make that clear. Yes, you can have them sign an issue on a divisive or non-divisive issue for voters. Is that clear?
Yes, I think that makes sense, and hopefully that answers the question as well. So there's there's a few other things that are going on that folks had said that they're doing around voter engagement. Would you like for me to share those with you, Dana, right now, or do you want me to hold on to those?
Let's do it.
Okay, so there's one individual which is was awesome, and it was very inspiring as I was reading the question, is that they're currently creating a guide to advocacy to help, and this is an organization that works with younger folks, and so they're currently creating a guide to advocacy on how they can transform their personal passions and identify the values into movements that require advocacy and communication with policymakers, as well as providing information about local government just in general. So I think that's an amazing thing that's this individual is doing. I think that's great. So,
well, could that individual send me what they come up with?
Of course.
I would love to share, the best. We don't have to recreate the wheel. Is the other thing I want to share with y'all is there's so many great groups that are working on really customizing a message for a particular community or a particular city. So I want to make sure we share those kinds of examples.
Yeah, and here's another organization was just looking to do more for 2019. They're kind of just in their brainstorming phase right now, so I think this is a great start for that brainstorming phase. So so those are the other two comments that I received. So folks keep asking questions, and we'll get to them, and we'll let Dana proceed with everything if that sounds okay.
Perfect. Cool. So the next thing we want to go to on the agenda is quick tips on humans. This is obviously the quickest list on humans, but I just want to give a few reminders that we've run into as you kind of are making this are engaging in this activity and are really with the goal of having people take a stake in their own civic participation. One is don't assume. Don't assume you know if someone is a regular voter, if they've already voted. Don't assume someone can't vote because of their criminal background or immigration status. Um, Keep in mind everyone doesn't have their constitutional right to vote, and that's something to work towards. Make sure you still recognize them as fully human and not just walk away because they might not be able to have the right to vote. Just ask. And I don't take anyone for granted that they're an active voter or that they're registered to vote, that they even think about it. So start with just people in your office and people in your friends and family, and yeah, don't assume. And then two is I make, voting is like going to the gym. Some of you might go to the gym all the time and you're just a regular gym goer and you go and work out and it is like clockwork. But for a lot of folks, it is an extra thing. You got to plan for it. You got to have a gym membership. You got to make a plan to actually physically go there. You can go before work. You can go after work. You don't just show up on the treadmill, 5 miles in. So this is like voting. We cannot, again, assume that people have it in their daily calendar on election day or on early vote, and that the more specific you get with people on a plan to actually go and cast their ballot. So I'm talking about time of the day. Who are you going? How are you getting there? Do you know the exact location? Did you buffer an extra time? Are you bringing anyone with you? Like really visualizing a very specific plan and then talking through the things that they need to bring. Great. No, don't forget your photo ID, your Wisconsin photo ID. If you're not registered to vote, no problem, but you need to show something that proves your residence to register to vote there. So these are the specifics that really increase the likelihood of someone showing up, is they have a really clear plan. And then another tip is to make it personal. So to people you know and trust, one of the biggest ways that we've seen and we're encouraging this year is through a program called Relational Voter Program. This idea that organizations are recruiting leaders who make a list of 30 friends, family, coworkers, people they know and trust, that basically they'll pick up their cell phone call, they'll pick up their text, and they make it really personal. So maybe they voted before, maybe they haven't, but maybe, I see you feel some sort of way about voting, but voting this election is really important to me for my family's health care. We've been on and off the state exchange or Obamacare, and we really want to make sure that's a stable system for us. And your vote will make a big difference. Or, just say it's really important that for whatever reason that's really important to you. So we've just heard across the board that this really cuts through all the chatter. This cuts through any misconceptions or news that's kind of confusing on this. Is just like asking someone you love and that loves you to vote for you, to vote for your family. And then lastly, I don't have this bullet, but so many habits are modeled. So if you want your staff to go vote, show them that you take time out of work to go vote. If you want your clients to go vote, walk through that process and try to model it for them as much as you can. And so people see that practice. It's easy to emulate. So moving on, here's some more examples. We already got a few from people on this call. But here's some examples of other nonprofits who are doing civic engagement, and I've been really inspired by their wide range of organizations. So the YWCA of Milwaukee is offering voter registration twice a week in their office. They've really evolved. They actually have a partnership with the city to have a formal kiosk. But then, so that means they have 1 or 2 trained staff that take a couple hours, have a consistent time, and they just set up a desk. But then they also have this ongoing kiosk that people can kind of self-serve. So They have clients coming in for a variety of reasons and really have made registration just a very consistent part of their of what happens when you walk into their space. Secondly, UNCOM, which is United Neighborhood Centers of Milwaukee, very different shelters and neighborhood organizations, neighborhood centers. They send out like a template almost, because they're kind of coordinate a variety of groups. So really just friendly suggestions, not saying you have to do this or this is a mandate for funding or anything, but ways of encouraging the people and the groups that they work with to promote voting, kind of from their email perspective. And then they also offer trainings of those different community centers and panelists where they can get more specific ideas, kind of like this webinar. Whoa. There's my little son. I don't know if y'all seeing that. That's my personal reason to vote, my 18-year-old boy. Okay, and then we're also working with a wide range of churches around the state who are coordinating like what they're calling souls to the polls. So it's just a fun way of saying, hey, after Sunday Mass or church service, we're all going to go to early vote, or we're going to go to early vote a Wednesday before Wednesday service, or we're going to go canvass and knock on doors just on the neighborhood around our church all together, and they ask people to volunteer. So that might take a little more work to coordinate a canvas, but let me know if it's the first time you're thinking about doing something like this and need some support on a door-to-door canvas or phones. Then on the bottom left here, something organizations can do is they might have a big list or a digital presence. So maybe it's taking someone who does your social media posts and saying, hey, for the next 2 months, we'd like you to commit 5 hours a week to promoting helpful, informative, encouraging, and funny messages. So kind of sending them in the right direction, but and giving them a little guidance on what is good and nonpartisan and what to stay away from, and just committing some hours to promoting it on your social media or your email blast. And then FCI, shout out to FCI, Forward Community Investments, giving the day off, not just to vote, but to help others go and vote. So I think they have some staff members who are doing door knocking to make sure on election day, nobody's twiddling their thumbs, working on their own emails, but out in the community, being really visible. So those are some of the examples. Tom?
Yes. Sorry about that. Yes. So we are doing, and also, beyond just kind of canvassing and, taking folks to the polls. I know, we're also, there's different roles that you can play. You obviously can become a poll worker. You can work through your city clerk's office. I know in Madison, if you just reach out to them, they'll reach back out to you and kind of gauge where your interest is where you're physically located, and if they can get you to work at a polling place near or around where you live. Also, just poll observers. That those roles are around as well, and so there's a lot of different opportunities for that. I know. Excuse me, in Madison, I know that I think it's Union Cab. It's one of the cab companies in our city here. They're actually offering free rides, but not everybody knows that. And there are people who still need to, get to the polls or have problems getting to the polls and things like that. So yeah, I mean, we're really trying to Dana's point, we don't want folks just to take the day and go sit and drink daiquiris. That they have to have a plan, and they have to show that they are going to be out and about, working the polls, working at the polls, driving people and things like that. So, and that speaks to Dana's point about, just showing folks, hey, this is what we're doing. And, hopefully we'll field some calls, like, hey, I understand that you guys are giving that day off. What types of things are people doing? And then hopefully that creates, kind of a groundswell for that to take place.
Cool. Awesome. So here are just a few examples of when I say shareables, things that we create, like I said, not branded. We don't have our logo on it or any organization's logo. Last week apparently was Talk Like a Pirate Day. So we had this, are you registered to vote? Our communications person thought it was hilarious. So it might be something that just kind of sticks out. And then from very informative, if you have a felony but are off papers and off parole, you can vote. And we like to make sure people know that. And a lot of times, folks who have a previous background don't actually know that they can vote once they're off, they have served their full sentence. So we want to change that law so you can vote actually never lose your constitutional right to vote. We think that's really important. But in the meantime, it's important to let folks know you do get your vote back. And then something as simple as, the state of Wisconsin has right, you can leave work. It's unpaid technically, but to make sure that folks know that you can take time off to go to work. So those are just a few examples. We encourage you to find more things like this, non-branded shareables that you can use, put in your Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or on your social or email list, and definitely take and share this content and use it yourself. That's why we create it. And then another thing that we have as a resource, and I would actually encourage y'all when sitting at your computers to take out your phone and text us. We send out just nonpartisan reminders that you can use and share, forward out, very quick little messages that are timely and have good links in it. So just text to the number 864-237 and put in the content vote, VOTE. You can do that right now, and you'll get a little disclaimer, a little follow-up message from us. And then again, we send out easy reminders, and honestly, I take and forward that message to some friends and family and other folks that need it. It just has great links in it to the state's website, or learn who's on your ballot was a really popular one. We also have a service like on election day or leading up to it. We'll just help people look up their exact polling location. So this is a really great resource that is still interactive, that you can use and reuse. So please text vote to 864-237. And also another shout out, FCI has been super consistent. They have a voter resource page that you should look at. And next week's webinar is also supporting, kind of keeps this theme going of nonprofit vote. So sign up for that, share that out.
Thank you, Dana. And so I also, just while you were talking, I did send that text message, vote to 864-237, and received a message back already. So thank you for that. I'm looking forward to getting those messages and then sharing those with folks and things like that. So yeah, no, that was great. And then Dana, did you want to maybe there was one question here that came through while you were speaking. Would you care to address that right now?
Sure. Which question are you thinking? Or what are we looking?
Yeah, no. This one just, this individual is just having a hard time kind of convincing other board members that political activities are allowed. They know about the prohibition on supporting a candidate and compare that with supporting a position on an issue. So do you have any maybe talking points or anything that you can share, or, how folks can address those questions if they're posed by board members?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the first one is not having to defend the legality and the specifics of it yourself, but actually, I love this Alliance for Justice. I would recommend you really going in and, it's a team of C3 compliant lawyers that put together these very specific guidelines. One is, if you're going into talking to your board, you wanna make sure you know where you stand and what you're proposing, and it's totally within the guidelines of the organization's legal parameters. So that's one, is know the legal stuff and have that backup, evidence. That might be a barrier in people's mind that you can just put to rest. Second thing is I would spend some time really relating it to your mission. So if you don't talk about voter participation or civic engagement explicitly in your mission, no worries. But like spend some time really making that connection, and maybe ask other staff people, being like, why would educating our clients about voting, in the democratic process, like enhance our mission, and have a good answer for that. Um, I'd be happy to brainstorm with you, depending on who you are, depending on your mission. I'm sure you can make that connection. But I think that's, if you think about the role the board member sits in, is they're really kind of, want to make sure the fiduciary responsibilities of the organization is intact, and that you're not breaking any laws, and that you stay within your mission. So if you can kind of show those three things, that A, this is totally legal, B, it's within our mission, and C, here's how we're going to make it happen within our budget, or here's, what it looks like. If someone's still opposed to it, after you kind of, you hear from them and those issues are addressed, I don't know. That might just be a tough cookie that you need to get off your board. Just kidding. But that's what's been working for us. That's been working for a lot of organizations. It's just like having those questions really thought about ahead of time. Again, fiduciary, how it makes sense financially, how you'd operationalize it within your budget. 2 is just the legal parameters, that you're well within it. And 3, how it's connected to your mission.
Great, thanks, Dana. And that can go a different way too. I was kind of speaking of the education piece, because I was speaking with a group, in Milwaukee, with their nonprofit organization, and not only selling that you should be doing these types of activities with your board, but what about the constituents? Because the people that you serve in at these organizations that you all work for, they're kind of driving what you are doing, correct? So I mean that you're addressing their needs, and if they see this, well, why are you pushing voting? This isn't something that I took this survey, and nobody that took that survey mentioned that voting is a big piece. But to Dana's point, there's an education component that needs to go to the constituents and your clients as well, to understand. This kind of goes back to the, civics 101. Policies are, shaped by the individuals that you elect, and those policies affect everybody. And, that's something that can't be overstated. Just the education to everyone about how things work. It's coming from a place of love and everything like that. So just coming from that way. But that was one thing that kind of stuck with me. In a discussion about that, how crucial that is to have education on all fronts.
Awesome. Any other questions or ideas that we want to share?
So, just kind of going through some of the, the questions and comments that came through, some ways that folks are, helping spread the word about voting is just putting up signage and, putting maybe something in your email signature. That's really a good plan. There's also, just social media. I'm not sure, I can't speak for a lot of other folks on the call, but I know that our social media is way more impactful. Facebook and Twitter and Instagram is way more impactful than just sending out emails and things like that. So maybe having a plan about that, and if your organization has a good relationship with a lawyer, and maybe having them kind of, hey, here are some short posts that we're thinking of sharing with the Facebook world or the Twitter world, and running those by a lawyer and making sure that they are nonpartisan, and that way you kind of feel a little bit better about sending that out into the world, and but also wanting to share that information, because the information that we're sharing is nonpartisan, completely. So that's a really big thing that
Tom, just on that, I want to share again, Alliance for Justice. They're a team of lawyers that actually offer a free service to consult on from a C3 compliance standpoint. So if you are like, hey, I have these signs or these messages we want to send out, this is new to us. We don't want to pay a legal lawyer, however much to kind of check this, but we'd love to have that guaranteed, as being compliant. So Alliance for Justice has like a resource on their website under Boulder Advocacy where you can engage with them via email, or they have a phone call or a phone number that you can call them and just like kind of do a quick consulting of a message, or you put together a voter guide, but geez, you'd really like a glance at it before you send it out. So I really encourage, that's been just a great resource for some of our partners, especially when you're just kind of dipping your toes in this pond and you're not totally clear of how this translates when you put your messages together. They've been awesome and they're very responsive.
That's great. So I'll also include that in the follow-up email to this presentation, because that could be a great resource, to have that. Just, like you said, you kind of just need a sounding board sometimes, and you want to make sure that, it sounds right. So I think that's all the questions that we have, and we are coming up against our 1 hour time limit, so we want to respect everybody's time. So we just want to thank everyone for joining us today. Special thanks to Dana and Wisconsin Voices for their hard work, not only with this presentation, but the work that they're doing. As the slide that you're looking at right now, check out Wisconsin Voices. It's a great resource. They've got a lot of shareables, which are amazing. And we also, Dana had mentioned on our website on forwardci.org, we have under What's New, we have we just formed a hashtag, which is hashtag nonprofits yes you can. So we have a lot of information, articles, links to other presentations and things like that on our website as well. So and also Dana did mention about another presentation that's coming up a week from today, Monday, October the 1st, with Caitlin Donnelly of Nonprofit Vote, entitled The Impacts Nonprofits Have When They Engage with Voters. During this presentation, Caitlin will discuss how to remain nonpartisan when engaging with voters, and she'll also be sharing 4 engagement strategies that are affirmed and encouraged by nonprofits and the IRS. So all of these presentations that we provide are free. There's no fee for that, and then we also post them on our website for after the fact for you to share with folks that you wish would have been with you while you've been watching your on this presentation. And then I feel like a broken record here, but it's also something that Dana had mentioned. But another spotlight is that Race to the Polls project by Kids Forward, Race to Equity, and the Wisconsin Budget Project. As public policy and advocacy organizations, they see the importance of centering the voices and needs of communities of color in the democratic process. Through their data and policy analysis, they have found that alarming racial disparities exist between Wisconsin's white population and its African American, Asian American, Latinx, and Native American populations, which stem from hundreds of years of inequitable policies. Their hope is that Race to the Polls can support and amplify the work of people of color and organizations committed to racial justice, which they have been doing for many, many years. Everyone must play their part in making Wisconsin the best place for every child, every family, and every community, including us. For more information about the project, you can visit racetothepolls.org, and I'll also include that in our follow-up message that'll be coming out this week. So with that, just like I said, wanted to thank everybody again. Thank you, Dana. We really appreciate your time. Thanks, everybody who attended, for hanging on and participating. It's great to have the engagement. So just wanted to thank you one more time. We really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.